Hey, welcome to Rio City Conversations. We're glad that you've joined us today. You're in for a treat as we've got Patrick and Natasha Mankin and then our very own Daniel Bell, who's joining the conversation today. If you're new with us, we gather in person every first and third Sunday of every month at the Hilton Hill Country in San Antonio. And then we do this every second and fourth Sunday of every month. We have these conversations where we take a look at the previous week's message. And so you're in for a great treat this weekend. Enjoy. All right, y'all. Well, hey, welcome back to Rio City Conversations. How are you guys feeling?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well,
I'm so warm. I am so warm right now.
It's cold in here.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in general, we got up to like 80 degrees today.
Oh,
Yeah.
outside.
Welcome to Texas.
Texas, Tejas.
80 degrees today. Snowmageddon last week. That was pretty crazy. Did you survive?
I'm gonna
you're
get a
clearly
shirt.
here.
I'm gonna get a shirt. I survived the Snowmageddon of 21.
Oh my goodness.
So did you guys lose power and water?
We lost water for almost 24 hours. But we had power the whole time.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you live next to the big university in town.
You get power. We ran out of power Sunday night of last week, and then all the way through like Wednesday night. So we were out. Had to go to my brother's. It was crazy. Were you, Daniel? Were you out of power?
Wednesday and Thursday, no power.
We survived, y'all.
We
We
did.
survived. Texas was not built for this. But you know who was built for this? This group right here.
This group.
Texans in general.
Man,
We survived.
I had a thought.
Remember the Alamo.
What if all the rattlesnakes died?
That
Because
would be
it
a
got so
miracle.
cold. We don't have any more snakes in Texas.
That would be a
Because-
miracle.
Because-
A week and it killed everything.
It killed all the
could have.
power. It
It
killed
could
all
have.
of our
Oh, no.
water pipes.
Oh man.
No
Well,
rattlesnakes.
well, this week we've got Patrick and Natasha. You guys,
Heyo.
you're married
Yep.
To each other.
To each other. That's good. We love that.
Yes.
How long have you been married?
How long? Do you remember?
Little over 15 years.
15
No more.
years.
15.
15.
Feels
50.
like it.
So whenever we do a marriage series, you guys are going to be the ones to
Bring
tell
the
us about
Q&A.
how to have a healthy marriage
Yeah.
It has been said that I'm the grandfather of
of the
the
team.
church or the team
Yeah.
because
Oh,
I've got the
haven't heard
most
that.
because I'm the oldest.
Well, actually, to
You're-
that note,
So I'm the grandmother? Oh, no.
but actually to that note, let's pass it over to the one who's actually the oldest at the table. That would be Daniel Bell.
All right, Daniel.
Yes, my,
Daniel, you are a part of our church, and tell us real quick about yourself. Married, kids, what do you got?
married, kids. We're here because of the Army. So,
Okay.
the
So
past-
veteran?
Yeah. So I'm a veteran. My wife's on active duty, and she's a healthcare provider, and so we've got 2 kids,
That's awesome.
and they're both old enough to be in a Montessori school, and that is. They're getting a little too independent for us. But
They're cute. They're cute.
They are cute.
They're
How old
cute.
are they?
6 and 3.
6 and 3. Man, and you guys have 2 kids.
Yes.
Got 2. Got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Man, and I've got 4. So collectively, we have the wisdom of sage
A
old
lot
people.
of ages here. Yeah.
A lot of ages.
And you
here.
look at me as you say sage old.
Yeah, no, 100%, and I will always remind you of that. So, well, hey, we last Sunday we talked a little bit about God, and that's what we do at church. We talk about God,
That's good.
and we are in this series called His Name Is, and we're looking at the names of God. So this past Sunday, we looked at the name of God being Rohai, which is shepherd. So we talked a little bit about shepherd. We talked sheep. We talked fields and streams and all of these good things.
Yes.
So it's good times. And I kind of want to just continue that conversation a little bit. Talk a little bit about the points that were made and how it applies into your life. And so one of the first things we talked about with the Lord being our shepherd, because we looked at Psalm 23.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about rest, because he talks about the psalmist David. He says, the Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pasture. He leads me by still waters. So we talked about rest and the importance of that. What are your thoughts on that? Rest is kind of one of those things that I feel like we're all chasing after, right? Like, what was your takeaway from that point? Anybody can go first.
So, like we were talking a little bit before we started, and it made me really think of like Daniel was talking. I want to take this over to you here, Daniel. But like, we've had this whole big COVID thing happen, and I feel like we've always been saying this for so long now too. Like we have got to slow down. COVID's like forced us all to slow down.
The Great American Slowdown.
And in my head, that equals rest. Like you've slowed down. But Daniel, you had like some really good points as you're talking about like we haven't been able to find rest really. Like it's created a whole new set of problems. So like what were some of those things that you were talking about?
So when we didn't choose to be here. We didn't choose to be in this situation.
COVID, right?
COVID, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you guys didn't. You didn't choose to be here.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I did not get into a Reformed theology discussion, but we didn't choose to participate in this whole COVID thing. It's there, and one of our difficulties as we talk to different people throughout. No one finds rest because we didn't make these conscientious decisions to live this way. And stepping back and saying, okay, I didn't choose this, but I'm going to participate is the only way that we can really find rest. And that's really difficult because you want to interact with people in person. You don't want to be looking at a screen because like that's what you did in your pastime prior to COVID, and now it's life, and that's not as relaxing. Like the blue light, you could get into the whole performance measurement side and take a look at how our lifestyles are not really allowing us to have that rest, and that's why we all have this particular fatigue, and then when we allow ourselves to consume whatever's on the news or even our conversations a lot of times go back to the difficulties that we're seeing within our society. That politically this was a really hard past year. And then and that's within the context of COVID, and it feels like there's everyone was ready for this to go away. So the bottom line in the perspective that I was bringing is we didn't choose to participate in this. It's not like a normal relationship. We love our kids, but were we prepared to homeschool our children? And for us, my wife was working on her post-grad this last year, and I was working on grad school, and then we're supposed to teach our kids in the middle of all that. And that when you're trying to learn and teach your kids, like have time to teach your kids, it's a really difficult time, and you didn't sign up for that. So finding rest, many times it requires our participation. Like you aren't really going to find rest unless you decide to participate.
It's like a choice. Like you have to choose rest. Now, Natasha, though, you are a working woman, so you teach full time, and then Patrick, you are a working man, so you two have two kids at home, but you were once I almost said a single mom.
Nope.
That didn't happen. You were a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
How did you?
I've always been in the picture. Okay.
So like, there's probably a lot of people listening or watching right now who they're like, let's talk about rest for a minute. When am I going to find that? Do you have any advice, any tips on that? Are you like, no, please, someone else like share with me? How do you do it?
I'm kind of in the middle of it because, at least for me, since I am a teacher, now that COVID is part of our lives, right? So like my school is in session, my kids are going to in-person school, and so I feel almost that's a little bit more rest in a sense, because fourth quarter last year, like when things started shutting down and schools were dismissing children to their homes, I was working from home as a teacher and trying to school our two children at the same time. And my school at that time, their expectations were very difficult. And so it was like, I felt like there was no rest because like screen fatigue at the end of the day, then you have to be mom and wife, cook dinner, and make sure everybody's caught up on all their stuff. It was very difficult. And that fourth quarter, there has been nothing like it in my whole career.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like at that time, it took a lot of communication on our part because he was still working out of the home there for the end of fourth quarter. But then when we were all home, that was kind of interesting. Having us all home, all together, all the time.
Nowhere to
like
go.
at first, you're like, oh, I love our family. We get so much time together. And then you're like,
I'm going to the office. I'm going to go back to the office. And work.
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
Go.
You and the kids are good, right? I'm going to.
All right, I'll
I'm
go.
going to go to the office real quick.
Yeah. So for me, I think it was trying to be intentional about going outside
Okay, yeah.
and getting away from my children for a little while, you know, and so he would take over whatever responsibilities so that I could go.
She had a
just
lot
walk.
of conversations with other teachers that she worked with. She basically just walked the block.
Yeah.
It was just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you getting out, walking around, just
Right.
moving.
Yes.
That
was
was-
helpful.
That was like a decompressing thing for you too. That was
Absolutely.
really helpful.
It's very interesting to me, and this is not something we talked about on Sunday, but like, it's interesting the whole rest factor, like how important it is to the Lord. Like, he sees it in Psalms, like the psalmist, he recognizes it, you know, David, he recognizes it for his sheep, but then he also recognizes it for himself in his relationship with God. But it's also one of the 10 commandments, you know, like have a Sabbath, have time to like turn off, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's almost like this badge of honor in the United States to be like busy.
Busy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm just so busy, you know. Well, how are you? Well, I've just got all this stuff. And it's almost like, look at me.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
on the inside, you're dying, you know. Your family's dying, your relationships are dying. Anybody have any thoughts on like just very practical, like, here's what I do. I force myself to do X, Y, and Z. That was a question we
Yeah.
didn't talk about earlier.
We didn't. But I think, like you're saying, it's a conscious thing you have to make.
Yeah.
Like a decision you have to make to say, I'm going to take these things off my plate. Like, I think of someone we knew in college who just all the time, she's like a social butterfly, and just always had all these things to do, and she had to go out with all these people. And I would just get so frustrated because I'd be like, you're doing this to yourself. Like, you just have to stop. Like,
Yeah.
just quit making appointments with everything or quit doing all these things. And, you know, initially that seemed like what COVID was kind of doing to all of us. Like, you know, don't have all these sports events to go to now, whether it was for kids or even like professional sports, those things were done. And now it's like you had to forcibly, like, things were taken off of your schedule. And I think that's just kind of what we have to do. We have to take things out of our schedule, you know, and, you know, maybe it's a little less streaming time with your family. Like, maybe that's kind of like been your family time to stream it, but maybe, you know, we've started doing this
I
thing.
feel like that's
Oh, well,
it's still our life.
it is still our thing, but then our 12-year-old daughter pops up like, hey, can we have game night tonight?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
she's even
Yeah.
like looking
Yeah.
to do something
That's
else.
true.
Like,
Yeah.
there's
That's
only
crazy.
so much Survivor we can take. Like, we're just gonna play some game, you know? She busts out like, can we play this
Clue.
game? Can we play this
Right,
game? And like,
yeah.
all right, let's do it. And as her father, I want to invest in that
Right.
too and be like, I want her to do things with me. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like rest, and
Yeah.
that's how it's. I mean, you know, for us, it's family time. It's like it's good quality stuff.
No screen time.
No
Yeah.
screen
I think that's
time. We're
kind
going
of
to
the
give
thing.
each other attention. Because, you know, and even as parents, like we recognize, I don't know if you guys have seen this, the more screen time kids seem to have, it sort of affects their behavior a
Yeah,
little bit. And that does
100%.
not create rest in our
No.
house. So it's like, nope, you're not doing that. You're not, no screen time in the morning, and
Yeah.
we're going to nix it.
Well,
more
same
at
for
night.
me, like even with, and we'll move on here after this, but like same for me, I try to, don't do a great job with this. My wife's gonna watch this, she's gonna go, that's not true. But like when I'm healthy, I will take my phone and I'll just put it to the side. I won't look at it first thing in the morning, and I won't look at it the last thing at night. And I know when I do that, I wake up a lot more refreshed. I sleep better because my mind's not just racing about some stupid article I just read,
Yeah.
or
Right.
you know, someone's Facebook post that I'm comparing my life to their life, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
like, so I think that's really helpful. And I think the invitation is always, the Lord wants you to have rest, and that's why he says he makes me lie down. Like, he knows we need it. We just need to willfully choose, okay, I will put it into my schedule.
Yeah.
I know we got to move on, but did you have a question about the comfort point that we talked about?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about comfort. So you especially hit on like the rod and the staff. And initially, at first, I heard that and I was like, "Isn't the rod and the staff the same thing?" Like it just sounds. But apparently, like the rod, as Daniel pointed out, as you pointed out, was the 22. It's basically like having the most aggressive weapon on your side that you could have.
It's almost like a cruiser.
Listen. I'm
I didn't
not.
catch that.
Thank you. Just move on. Whatever.
It's what everyone in the Army carries when they're going out
in battle.
Yeah, no, it's almost as effective as a minigun.
Yeah. But it would be something that would help the shepherds protect their sheep against predators, against the evil wild villains of the fields. And then the staff was like a comforting tool, essentially, and a guiding tool for shepherds. And so you even talked about like how as the sun was setting behind the mountains, and then that sort of cast this long overbearing shadow and would start freaking the sheep out, and the shepherd would just start walking amongst them, and like just even the fact or the act of laying the staff down, like just letting it touch the sheep was comforting because they understood it, they knew it was familiar. So us today, and I'm just like, okay, so what does that look like? So how do I feel God's staff when like I've got this overbearing shadow in my life? I'm freaking out. I can't work. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, my income is not there. Like, my car needs to be fixed. How do I feel like God's there with me when like bad things are happening? Or maybe it's like somebody's at work and they're just like out to get me. Like, it's like, man, I'm like watching over my shoulder all the time. Like, how do I feel that? How do I like get into that place where I know God's there?
Yeah. It's a good question.
So feel free to answer that, anybody. Like, if you have an answer. If not, no worries.
Yeah, well, so in our family, especially with Jamie's academic background, and communication is kind of my focus, is taking a look at what you have control of and what you don't have control of. And the biggest thing that you have control of really is your schedule, right? And you may not have control of when you work or whatever, but the rest of it, when you actually find rest, and if you have that discipline to go to bed instead of watch TV, if you have that discipline to get up when, I think like Jocko Willink, a lot of people, they look at I think it's his Instagram that has, like, he wakes up at 4 o'clock and he takes a picture of his watch, and that's his deal. And
4 o'clock comes around twice a day.
It does.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
On the American 2 12-hour on the international, 4 o'clock is 4 in the morning. But that discipline that we have, whether it's for our physical body or for our spiritual practice, and some people get into this whole theoretical thing that, it's not about discipline because discipline takes you outside of rest. No, like it's just like the law. What is the law? The law gives us kind of guidance, right? But if we follow the law to follow the law, it doesn't give us rest. But if we're connected with the Spirit, it gives us rest to follow that. And so that's ultimately what I see in the rest that we need is we need to step back and say, okay, I have control of this. God has control of everything outside of that realm. And one of the big things that we've found is when we're following that, and we even employ spiritual discipline, like whether it's just reading one scripture in the morning, it kind of sets your mind on the things. It sets the tone for the entire day. Yeah. I'm not big into prosperity preachers or anything, but I do, like when I'm taking my kids to school, I'll turn on one of those videos, or I'll put one of the videos on the speaker system in the car that talks about who God is. So because it reminds you of who God is in your life, and so like while you wish for $1 million, God's not there to just give you $1 million, but it helps you to understand that God is your provider and that God is there to help you. And so for us, that's one of the things that really help us. But it's like you were talking about earlier, if you aren't in that spiritual practice, like if you're not doing what you know is right, or you're not in the right place, then you're not going to find that rest.
Well, yeah, and that's true, and I love that invitation, and it's the words, it's Psalms, right? Like that's what David was doing. I mean, he's writing this out, he's singing this, you know, he's saying, "For you are with me." It's just that reminder of like, no matter how hard it gets, or no matter how alone it may feel with COVID or with Snowmageddon or with pipes bursting, it's like, no. Like, I'm reading the Bible, and I believe what God's word says about who God is, and I believe he is with me. And I think, you know, and I'd mentioned this in the sermon, like, I think God uses people to remind us of these things. You know, he'll use someone in your life group, or he'll use someone that you interact with at church, or he'll use a text, or like I had the other day, someone texted me out of the blue, and I was kind of just not having the most awesome day. And it was just that simple reminder, like, "Hey man, I'm praying for you, thinking about the church, thinking about you guys." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have no idea how much I needed that right now." Like, and it was like, thank you, but also, God, thank you. Like, thanks for using that person, you know? One thing I wanted, and we don't have, like I said, a ton of time left, but we talk about the rod, right? Like, it's the staff, it's the comfort side of God. But then you also have like what seemingly would seem the violent side of God, or the protector side of God. And I love that part because David does not fear talking about this. Now, he lived in a different world. Everybody's offended today. But back then, it was just like he's just saying what he needs to say. But it's like there's God's comfort, but God's also protector. And he fights back the wolves. He fights back the lions, things that would try to harm his sheep. Daniel, I want to ask you, because we haven't really said too much. You were spec ops in the military with the Army, which I love because I nerd out and I just admire you for it. Don't make fun of me. We don't have enough time for you to make fun of me. Definitely in the military. You spent time in Afghanistan
And Iraq.
So in the Iraq War. And so can you share a little bit, like, as much as you're comfortable, like being in those military combat moments, how did you reconcile this? Like, was there anything inside of you that said, I feel like I'm just gonna die right now? Or were you like, God, no, you're gonna protect me right now? Like, do you have any examples of where you kind of like leaned into that of the Lord, you know?
So I think from a spiritual standpoint, it's difficult to fully describe that in a way that everyone can fully relate.
Yeah.
But I think that combat, explaining how people are able to go into it because of confidence in their equipment, I think that is really descriptive for anybody that's listening, whether they have a spiritual whether they have a known spiritual connection or not. The biggest thing for us is having confidence in our equipment. So we do lots of training. It's repetitive, very repetitive, whether it's fast roping or everything you do to prepare before you jump out of an airplane, or going to the range to make sure that you're qualified on your weapon. You have confidence in all of your equipment and all of your training. So when you go there, you're like, okay, so if anything happens, this is what's gonna go down. This is how I'm going to react. This is how the people on either side of me are going to react. Now, the confidence that we have in the eternal sense makes us not fear what happens after life.
Wow.
But we have these things that it's just these disciplines. Going back to the whole discipline, it's the discipline and the use of that equipment that gives us that confidence, and it's that spiritual practice. It takes us back to the daily spiritual practice, and it's just like when I had not jumped or even been around. I went for, I think, a little over a year without jumping out of an airplane. And the next time I think it was like 13 or 14 months. And the next time it was not like, you weren't prepared for it.
Yeah.
And so it goes to that whole like daily discipline on the spiritual side, the daily discipline. You're going to be prepared for these things. And so it's going to be that conscious decision when things happen. Oh, hey, yeah, I've got that.
So it's almost like you're saying, I guess what I'm hearing you say is like, stay close to the shepherd. I mean, because that's your equipment, right? Like for the life of the believer, it's tapping into the fact that we have a very real God who is very much with us on a daily basis. When you become a Christian, the Spirit of God, indwells inside of you, and we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? So it's like, I like how you said, like, it's fear, but it's also just a rest, knowing like, man, if the worst that could happen, and that is death, will actually turn into the best that could happen, kinda, like Paul, where he's like, hey, I would love to be with the Lord, but I also need to be here, but I really want to be with the Lord. It's like, man, for the Christian, the hope that we have is like, this life is not everything. I mean, obviously none of us wants to, I mean, in your situation, you're talking literal life or death situations, and I think for a lot of us, I'm not jumping out of airplanes. I've got a 22 rifle, so I'm not in combat situations except for with possums and raccoons. But like for the person who maybe you can kind of finish this up with this, Natasha, but like for the person who's not in a combat situation, but just day in and day out, how has the Lord been protector for you guys? Like, have you sensed that? Have you experienced that in any sort of way?
Absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with perspective, right? So what we put our focus on is what is biggest to us in that moment. So am I going to choose to focus on, I don't know, what's bad that's recently happened? So like when we first moved here, it was crazy between our rent bill and our utilities bill. It was like thousands of dollars, okay? Thousands of dollars that were not in the plan. And money is like that's my sore spot. And so it was like, it had me questioning, are we sure we're supposed to be down here? Like, let's go back up to Missouri. And so it felt big. So my perspective were on all of those problems. But we helped talk each other down. And so it's just like when we shifted our perspective to the Lord, our calling, those were still big issues. But I think it helped me to get my focus, my, what were we using? Discipline back onto, praying, reading the word, and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot, like, I love what you said. It's like you trusted your equipment.
Yeah.
I think for us as Christians, like, to put it, I don't know, in a weird way, I don't know, but God is our equipment, right? Like, we need to trust God. And the only way we do that, like trusting your equipment, like you go through all these motions, and sometimes it might seem mundane, like just getting up earlier to read your Bible. Natasha does that every morning, and it's like, it's all these things. And I think it's also our life experiences too. Like, we didn't, like, if that was like our first experience, like a struggle together, was like, we had that money issue, that would have been a much bigger deal. But we've already seen that equipment at work. We've seen God at work in our lives, and we've seen things happen already. And we were now able to look back and be like, God took care of that. God, we were in the valley. We had a deep shadow on us.
He's done it before, so he'll do it again.
So it's, and even as people though, man, we can lose our trust and our faith so easily still. And like the fact that we were still like, this stinks. Why is this happening? And is this the right? Were we really supposed to help plant the church? We're supposed to move down here. Well, I already quit my job. Here we are.
We in it now.
But we've been in it before, and we've been in the trenches, so to speak, and we'd seen God prevail and God overcome and work what He's going to do, and so it was a much easier way for us to be like, man, I can trust this. I can trust God right now.
Yeah, He helps us through.
Yeah, even though it could be a totally different situation than what you've experienced before, but the fact still was, God took care of that situation. We won in the end because God was with us. He took care of us.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like maybe that is the way that we feel like God's staff on us.
Yep.
It's like we're able to look back on our past experiences and say, man, yeah, God was there. He did it. He's going to do it again.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are with me. You know, and it's the journey. It's like just like you said, they've been through valleys before. They're going through another valley. They reminded God's definitely still with them. You know, so that's the encouraging thing. Hate to cut this short, but we got to. We're out of time. So thank you guys for taking some time and sharing a little bit. But we'll see you guys on March 7th, Hilton Hill Country.
See you there.
We're gonna worship.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope that you can join us next Sunday at the Hilton Hill Country on March 7th. We've got 2 service times you can choose from, 9 o'clock or the 10:30. We hope to see you there.